President Trump has a new target in the growing trade war, Hollywood.
Yeah, the president says he plans to impose a 100% tariff.
100% tariff.
100% tariff.
100% tariff
On movies made outside the U.S.
Imagine a world where Korean movies fill theaters in New York, Indian series dominate European streaming platforms, and Brazilian soap operas go viral across Asia. Now, imagine a country that was once the center of this industry, building tariff walls to stop the global rise. This isn't a futuristic dystopia, it's the present. Last week, former President Donald Trump proposed a 100% tariff on foreign films and audiovisual content. The justification? To protect the American industry. Donald Trump's recent announcement of a 100% tariff on films produced outside the United States has sparked a deep debate about the future of both the American and global film industries. According to him, the measure is intended to combat the discouragement of domestic production, claiming that the flood of foreign content has undermined the strength of Hollywood. However, critics argue that the move seems more like a protectionist reaction to the relative decline of American cultural hegemony, especially as creative powers like South Korea gain global prominence. According to the New York Times, the tariff is expected to directly affect major streaming platforms such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Apple TV+, which rely heavily on globalized catalogs and international productions. The global film industry generates more than $136 billion annually, according to data from PwC. While the United States still holds a significant share of that total, its dominance is steadily decreasing. Between 2018 and 2023, the U.S. market share dropped from 65% to 51%, while countries like South Korea, India, Nigeria, and Spain have increased their visibility in global catalogs. Trump's tariff proposal seems to ignore this shift, seeking to impose restrictions on an industry that, by nature, thrives on cultural exchange and the free flow of creativity. Experts such as urbanist and creative economy analyst Richard Florida warn that cultural isolation in an interconnected world could spell the collapse of America's cultural relevance. The White House's argument is based on the notion that American producers face competitive disadvantages, with higher production costs and strict regulations, while foreign productions enter the domestic market with ease. But this view fails to consider that many independent American creators rely on the very platforms Trump is now threatening to undermine. By imposing such tariffs, traditional Hollywood is not being protected. Rather, access is being restricted for new voices, including those from within the U.S. itself. According to a study by the U.S. Independent Film Association, over 40% of American independent films are co-productions with international teams, meaning they would be directly penalized by the new policy. Streaming platforms and social media have decentralized audience preferences. The success of South Korean productions like Squid Game and Parasite has proven that viewers are open to content beyond English and major studios. A Statista survey found that 72% of global audiences say they prefer relevant and innovative content, regardless of its origin. The proposed 100% tariff seems to go against this trend, interfering directly with what the public chooses to watch. Instead of offering more diversity, it seeks to limit the range of options, something many view as a form of economic censorship. In the short term, the tariff might bring in revenue for the U.S. government and put pressure on foreign studios. But in the long run, the risk is the erosion of America's soft power, one of its most potent geopolitical tools since World War II. For decades, Hollywood was the showcase of the American dream. Now, it risks becoming a closed and introspective market. South Korea, on the other hand, is investing in international partnerships, strategic government funding, and global distribution. The result? Cultural exports growing at a rate of 12% per year, according to the Korean Film Council. Ironically, Trump's tariff could accelerate the shift in the cultural power center and help solidify a new global leadership in cinema. In 2020, the world watched in awe as the South Korean film Parasite made history at the Oscars by winning Best Picture, an unprecedented achievement for a non-English language production. But that moment was no accident. It was the culmination of a deliberate national strategy by South Korea to turn culture into power. Behind the success was consistent investment in creative infrastructure, audiovisual education, and state-backed incentives. The Korean Film Council, Kovic reported that between 2010 and 2020, the country invested over $1.5 billion in the film sector, including international distribution funds and support programs for screenwriters and directors. Unlike the United States, where the industry relies almost exclusively on private funding and major studios, South Korea developed a hybrid model of state support and independent production. Through tax breaks, public grants, and export incentive programs, the South Korean government helped foster an environment where new talent thrives and local works reach a global audience. A concrete example is the platform WAV, backed by South Korean media and telecom conglomerates, which has become one of the biggest showcases for Asian series with cinematic quality, such as The Glory, a Netflix hit. According to the BBC, this structure allowed South Korea to export more than $14 billion in cultural content in 2022, surpassing even its exports of home appliances. The distinction lies not only in institutional support, there is a unique visual language, aesthetic, and narrative approach in South Korean cinema and series, blending social criticism, psychological suspense, and local cultural elements. These productions have captivated Western audiences without compromising their identity. The success is not just financial, it's symbolic. By gaining international recognition, South Korea has begun to shape the global imagination, once dominated by Hollywood values. As noted by the South China Morning Post, this phenomenon is part of a broader soft power strategy implemented since the 1990s, with backing from the Ministry of Culture. Another pillar of South Korea's success is technical training. Universities like the Korea National University of Arts produce highly skilled filmmakers, screenwriters, and directors, many of whom leave the classroom with short films already awarded at international festivals. The audiovisual industry is seen as strategic from an early stage, both economically and geopolitically. The government supports storytelling innovation labs, cutting-edge post-production studios, and partnerships with foreign universities. This foundational intelligence generates works that not only have commercial appeal, but also earn critical acclaim, such as Decision to Leave and Broker. Parasite was the symbol, but not the peak. Since then, South Korea has solidified itself as a global cultural powerhouse, with series like Squid Game, which became Netflix's most-watched show in 2021, and award-winning films dominating the Cannes and Berlin film festivals. The data confirms the trend. In 2023, South Korean films represented 11% of the catalog on all major global streaming platforms. South Korea's rise is no accident. It is the result of planning, talent, and cultural diplomacy. While the US imposes tariffs, Korea builds bridges. In a controversial statement, President Donald Trump announced a 100% tariff on films produced outside the United States, claiming that the American industry is being harmed by the rise of foreign content on streaming platforms. According to Trump, the incentive for foreign production is killing American originality. Although the measure has not yet been implemented, it has already drawn criticism from various sectors, including the Motion Picture Association, which warned that this type of barrier harms consumers and limits access to cultural diversity. Reuters reported on the backlash among Hollywood executives and international trade experts, who argued the proposal reflects more of a fear of losing global relevance than a real strategy for economic protection. For decades, Hollywood had no rivals. Its films dominated global box offices, set technical standards, and launched cultural trends. But this dominance began to erode with the rise of platforms like Netflix, Prime Video, and Disney+, which started to include, and often prioritize, non-American content. The global audience, once dependent on Los Angeles studios, now watches German thrillers, Spanish romances, and Korean dramas with equal enthusiasm. In 2022, according to Statista, over 65% of titles watched on Netflix in the US were produced outside the country, signaling a shift in taste and behavior that tariffs are unlikely to reverse. Contrary to Trump's suggestion, the proliferation of foreign films does not pose a threat, but rather expands the global creative ecosystem. Many independent American filmmakers see this moment as an opportunity. More competition drives innovation. Platforms like Mubi and A24 have shown that there is still room for American auteur productions to shine, even in a globalized market. The problem, as noted in a New York Times article, is not foreign competition, but the concentration of power in the hands of major studios. which invest billions in franchises while neglecting new talent. Tariffing foreign competitors does not solve this structural crisis. Historically, cultural protectionism has rarely achieved long-term success. France, for example, imposes screening quotas for French and European films, yet young audiences still prefer Asian or American content on digital platforms. In the US, Trump's proposal could increase the cost of licensing foreign titles, but it wouldn't prevent access through global platforms based outside the country. Experts at the Brookings Institution warn that the risk is a boomerang effect, with other countries retaliating against American content, especially in key markets like India, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. More than an economic issue, the US response exposes a geopolitical fear, the end of the Western narrative monopoly. For decades, Hollywood exported not just films, but also lifestyles, values, and ideologies. Now, with the rise of cultural hubs like South Korea, India, and even Nigeria, the global cultural discourse is becoming more decentralized. To many analysts, Trump's tariff is a symbol of that fear, a fear of a multipolar world, even on screen. As the Financial Times provocatively stated in an editorial, perhaps we are not witnessing the collapse of the American industry, but rather the definitive democratization of audiovisual culture. South Korea, a country with fewer than 52 million inhabitants, has become a global cultural powerhouse over the past 2 decades. The symbolic turning point was the 2020 Oscar victory of the film Parasite, which took home the awards for Best Picture, Director, and Original Screenplay. But the real transformation began much earlier, with strategic government investments in culture and technology since the 1990s. According to the OECD, the creative sector now accounts for more than 3% of South Korea's GDP. It's no coincidence that Seoul has become a reference not only in film but also in pop music, gaming, and even gastronomy. The Hallyu, or Korean Wave, is a carefully constructed geopolitical soft power project. Unlike the US, where the cultural industry is largely driven by market forces, South Korea adopts a hybrid model with strong state support. Since the 2000s, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism has allocated billions of won to promote cultural exports, establish film schools, and boost creative startups. The government facilitates co-productions, sponsors festivals, and subsidizes international distribution. A study by Harvard Business Review shows how this strategic planning allowed the country to leverage culture as both an economic and diplomatic asset, influencing even global consumer habits. While Hollywood seeks universal formulas, South Korea invests in local narratives with global authenticity. Series like Squid Game and My Name captivated audiences without abandoning their Korean cultural identity. According to the BBC, Squid Game was watched in over 140 million households within its first month on Netflix. Seoul's strategy is not to compete with Hollywood in budget, but in cultural relevance and narrative impact. The success extends beyond directors and actors. Korea has developed a sophisticated production ecosystem, with companies like CJ Entertainment, Studio Dragon, and Showbox exporting films, series, and formats worldwide. Moreover, Seoul has drawn the attention of streaming giants. Netflix has invested more than $2.5 billion in Korean content through 2024, according to the Financial Times. With well-paid writers, specialized schools, and a demanding local audience, Korea's industry delivers both technical and narrative quality, and the world is watching. South Korea's cultural dominance is not just symbolic, it directly impacts the economy and diplomatic relations. Tourism fueled by K-dramas, the export of fashion and cosmetics, and Seoul's growing international prestige are all reflections of a diplomacy based on enchantment, not imposition. In contrast, the US's tariff rhetoric appears as an attempt at coercion in the face of competition that can't be contained. As the South China Morning Post noted, Korea's success shows that cultural influence today is earned through empathy, not commercial impositions. Donald Trump's recent decision to impose a 100% tariff on films and audiovisual content produced outside the US has reignited a long-standing debate. Is cultural protectionism still viable in a world of global streaming platforms? The former president argues that America is facing a kind of cultural deindustrialization and claims the move is aimed at reviving domestic studios. However, critics say such measures are reactive, not structural, and ignore the fact that global, including American, audiences demand narrative diversity. According to Reuters, the policy could backfire, raising consumer prices and reducing cultural offerings. The international success of productions like Parasite, Roma, and Squid Game proves that audiences value authenticity and diversity, not just English-language blockbusters. Platforms like Netflix, Prime Video, and Disney Plus have already recognized this shift in demand, which is why they are heavily investing in local content. Some argue that protecting the domestic market is a legitimate way to support local production. But there's a fine line between support and isolation. South Korea, for instance, promotes its culture with strong state support while remaining open to foreign content, and has still managed to dominate the global market. Canada enforces minimum quotas of national content on platforms, but doesn't impose prohibitive tariffs. The US, long the champion of free market media, now appears to be seeking shortcuts to regain lost ground. The question is the real issue external competition or a lack of internal renewal? This moment opens space for countries from the so-called Global South, like Brazil, Nigeria, India, and Mexico, to expand their presence on the global cultural stage. With decentralized platforms, lower production costs, and growing local talent, a unique geopolitical window is emerging. The American blockade could redirect investments and audiences to other regions. For example, Globoplay has already secured international partnerships to distribute Brazilian telenovelas and series in African and Asian markets. As The Guardian pointed out, this realignment could give rise to a new multipolar cultural axis, with less Hollywood and more of the world. We are at a crossroads. Either we embrace cultural plurality through innovation, or retreat into ineffective nostalgia. The audiovisual industry is evolving, and power will no longer belong to those who control the studios, but to those who win hearts with meaningful stories. Tariffs, boycotts, and protectionist rhetoric may work in the short term, but history shows that creativity can't be regulated by decree. The final question remains: who truly decides what culture has value? The state or the viewer?